the south coast, hence the weird accent. So I'm from Eastbourne, also known as Ebo for those who live there. Just my wife calls it that. But it's been great just to be here this week and being able to interview different people about their stories and then to say a little bit afterwards about Jesus and what he means for us. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We've got another cracking story and we've got the legendary Pam who's going to come up and join me on stage on these lovely chairs, which are not going to cause you any issues whatsoever. Yeah, and if they do cause you a bit of backache, enjoy just moving around a bit. But Pam, come and join me. Shall we give Pam a warm welcome? Welcome, Pam. Thanks very much. Can you tell us where have you come from today?
Right. So I work in Birmingham as a primary school teacher. So I've flown down the motorway, dropped in, saw my mum for half an hour. She fed me, and then I got on the motorway.
Wow. So you're going to be really on the ball tonight.
I'm hoping to be on the ball tonight.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for coming down. We really appreciate it. Let's start with where it all began for you. So where were you born and raised initially?
Yes, I'm hoping for a cheer for this bit. I was born in Huddersfield in West Yorkshire. Hey!
Is that just one Yorkshireman in the house? Great, in Huddersfield.
Yeah.
And Huddersfield is known, there's a few kind of popular, well-known people from Huddersfield, aren't there?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. So I think Jean-Luc Picard, Sir Patrick Stewart, I think he's like the head of the patron of the university or something.
Okay.
I know, I'll quickly Google this as well.
Okay.
Here's a few more. There's Harold Wilson, I think. He comes from Huddersfield.
Yes,
1964 to 1970.
Yes.
And what else did I discover today?
Yeah.
Roger Hargreaves of Mr. Men book fame.
Oh, yes.
Apparently he's from Huddersfield. Yeah. Which would be great.
They're quite hard books to read, I'll have you know. Yeah, apparently the inferences is quite hard in there.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's a primary school teacher insight there. Brilliant. So, born and raised in Huddersfield. What was life like for you in Yorkshire,
so
West Yorkshire?
I was born into, there's 6 of us altogether, so there's mum, dad, I've got 2 brothers and 1 sister, and my first 10 years were there, so brought up in a Sikh family, very, I would say, devout in terms of the cultural commitments to the Sikh faith. So a lot of my life was very much around family. Family was a big thing. You did things with your own family, did things with your extended family. And our Sundays would be spent at the temple, which was going there on a Sunday morning, listening to the Guru Granth Sahib, which is considered the book that they would read. I didn't understand a word. In fact, I think I spent a lot of my time rolling around on the floor because it was just done in Punjabi and I wasn't that fluent. But you were expected to go there and you took part in the meal that was offered. Now, I will say the food is amazing. These Asian women know how to cook.
So what's some typical examples of some quality?
Okay, so you would get
food?
aloo gobi, which is cauliflower and potato, because they're vegetarians. Sikhs will only serve, devout Sikhs will only ever serve vegetarian food. You would get lentil dal, which you'd be used to, chickpeas, chickpea dal, that was lovely. And you'll get never naan bread, it's always chapatis that you would have. So it's
very thinner, yeah.
So that was the Sunday. The week would be, my father taught me to read Punjabi, and we would read bits of the Guru Granth Sahib, and we learnt how to read bits of it, and some of it was in English that we would read as well. And you'd do morning prayers and you would do evening prayers as we were growing up, but we never did the daytime prayers because we were all at school. So that was family life, and I loved it in Yorkshire because I used to spend a lot of my time playing in the back lane, just hide and seek half of my life. So Brilliant. It was a great time in Huddersfield. So yeah.
And do you drink tea, Yorkshire tea? Is that one of your best
Do you
favourites?
know what? I will honestly say I've only just started drinking Yorkshire tea now as an adult.
This gentleman's being sick in the front row here.
I'm afraid it was just normal tea. But we would make brewed tea, which would have all the spices in, which are good for, the ginger, the seeds that need to go in there, the poppy seeds, the cardamom, that sort of thing. That's how we had tea.
Oh, sounds amazing. Wow, so you're there for about 10 years and then you kind of headed to the deep dark south.
Yeah.
So,
the Midlands, yeah.
Oh, the Midlands,
It was the Midlands. So I moved at the age of 10 down to Warwick, and growing up in a Sikh family, very much involved following a lot of traditions, a lot of customs that you would be used to doing, and one of those is obviously going to the Gurdwara and believing in what you were told to believe in, because Mum and Dad raised us to understand that actually we're born into the Sikh faith, so that is our religion. They're born into that faith, so that's their religion. That's how they interpreted the world. That was their world view of how we all exist together in some shape or form. And as we grew older, as I grew older, I began to kind of question quite a lot of the practices we were doing. So I really struggled to understand. My hair was down to here, which is very lovely hair, and I could sit on it. But my brothers would cut their hair, and I would say, well, how come why do I have to grow my hair? And actually they get to cut their hair. Why is it that I have to keep my legs covered but they can wear shorts? So I was quite a kind of a why kind of kid, probably a wino in some ways, but a bit annoying for my parents, I'm sure.
Always asking your questions.
Yeah, always asking questions, which is not what you would do in my family background. Especially women did not ask questions. I did, but because I was a child, I think I just about got away with it. But as I kind of came down to Warwick, I began to question those practices. And the Sikh faith overall, Ekamkar is the emblem for it, which means there's only one God. And the Sikh faith is actually born out of, when I looked into it, 1500s is when it kind of, its origin date is. There's not exactly known what the actual date is. But it is kind of born out of a political fight between both Hindus and Muslims to create equality out of groups of people and to recognise that, we're valuable as human beings. So it's a philosophy of life, really. And one of the key things that runs through it is the message of equality. So all people are equal. But I couldn't see that being worked out with the way my brothers could get away with doing things that I wanted to do. And the things I wanted to do were very different. But my sister and I lived quite a restricted life. My brothers had a little bit more freedom. Not lots still, but just enough for me to maybe be a bit jealous, I think I would probably say on that front. So I began to question all of those things. And as I grew up, I started asking Mum and Dad, I said, come on, why, what? And their answer would be, that's our religion, that's what we do. And I would actually only question Mum more, and that's what she would say, because you didn't really question your dad as such. There was an authority there that you didn't cross over. I mean, he was okay when I did, but you didn't do it too many times, is what I would say. And eventually, as life kind of carried on, and I became a teenager, and we're all wonderful when we're teenagers, aren't we? Don't know what you were like, Martin.
Oh, perfect.
So I then just looked at my family life, and I just went, I just can't see this being consistent with the belief of what Sikhism is supposed to teach and the practice of it. And I eventually got to a point at some point where I just turned around and I just went quietly to myself, because I wouldn't dare tell my dad, and I just thought, okay, I just feel that religion was a man-made concept for the advancement of men only. So at that point, all my Sundays that I used to go to the Gurdwara stopped, and I started to do less of it. And I only went to the weddings, etc., and the customs that I was expected to go to. But I didn't believe in any of it.
And there was a particular moment, wasn't there, when you were about age 14, when something quite significant happened, the icing on the cake as such, in those beliefs, in terms of just something where a certain guy was brought into the house and you were...
Oh yes, so I was just wondering what you were alluding to.
The icing, not quite the icing, it's my weird phrases.
It was, well, it wasn't, it was me,
The straw that broke the camel's back.
The straw that broke the camel's back was I was raised in a family where basically my mum had to raise both my sister and I to be ready for marriage, to be ready as a wife. And so we learnt how to cook, we learnt how to clean, we learnt how to do the washing, learned how to do a bit of knitting really badly, tried to do some sewing, didn't go well either, and they brought in a suitor for us. I was age 14, my sister was age 16, she's a couple of years older than me, and it was actually to see if the suitor would like my sister. And as I was serving the tea, which was what I was expected to do, respectfully, I did that, and at the end of it all, it transpired that the suitor wanted to marry me instead, of which my father, bless him, I love him, just said, yeah, okay, and I was age 14, so he was
Wow.
ready to betroth me there and then.
And what was your reaction?
Yeah,
What was your reaction to that?
I didn't have a reaction as such at that point because you weren't supposed to. My mother, thankfully, by God's grace, actually put her foot down and she went, no way. She's too young, this is not for her, she's not doing this. And so it was a flat out no. And I would have been married into a Sikh family who were practicing Sikhs, who wore the turban, who you would see with the long beards, wear the Qurban on the 5Ks, which is if you know anything about me, it's quite a strict upbringing, and it doesn't suit my personality at all. Given the fact that I ask a lot of whys, it wouldn't have been good for him or for me.
Right.
And so that was the point where I just turned around and I just thought, yeah, I can't do this. I don't want an arranged marriage, and I don't want to live my life this way, and I don't want anyone telling me how to live my life, because I can't qualify anywhere in the Guru Granth said why I have to have an arranged marriage and why that would be okay to have as well, because you were literally marrying from one family into another family. And for me, I didn't really want to marry my in-laws. I don't mind getting married, I just don't want to marry all of you as such, because then the authority lies with them and not with your husband or yourself within your marriage. I kind of already grabbed that and I thought this really isn't for me, and it was quite a scary thing at 14, quite a scary thing at 16 for my sister as well, to have to experience that because she was closer to it. And that was the bit that solidified for me. I just thought, men make the decisions for me, telling me what to, and I don't get that and I don't agree with it because I can't understand where that comes from.
Yeah.
And if I asked, there was no actual answer for it either. So I, at that point, quietly just went, religion is a man-made concept for the advancement of men and men only, and therefore I don't want any of this. So I kind of quietly became an atheist. And then later, that was 14, about the age of 16, I started studying sociology and realised that actually a lot of my thoughts were not only aligning with being an atheist, but they were aligning with being a feminist as well. And at the same time...
A particular wave of feminism first?
No.
The whole shebang?
Just, the whole lot. And then also Marxism, because I was studying Marxism as well. I know it's a bit crazy. I went for all the theists you could go for at the end of the day, a melting pot. And it was just such a far cry from the fact that I did believe in something beforehand, and now I believed in none of it. I just felt everything was man-made, and therefore I now want to make the choices for myself. And then I'll be held accountable for my own choices.
So you're really kind of searching and really questioning and just not taking things for granted growing up. Very inquisitive.
Definitely.
And what happened? Because your older sister then went off, didn't she? Then a bit later to university, and that something happened to her, which then had a big impact on you.
Yeah, so she's amazing, my sister. So we weren't supposed to get educated. Both my sister and I weren't. My dad wasn't hot on sending us to have A-levels or university degrees, and she fought the lot, and I rode in on her coattails, and I was like, I'll go to university, whereas she had a real battle to get there, and I was like, Dad, I'm going to university. He was like, okay. So when she went to university, she fell in with a bunch of Christians. I was doing my A-levels at the time, and for the first time, she hadn't realised I didn't agree with them. We just didn't talk in my family. We didn't talk about our agreements or disagreements as such. She fell in with a bunch of Christians, and they began to share the gospel with her. They basically began to talk to her about the fact who God is, and telling her about his character, his personality, his plans, his ways, how to live your life, the fact that actually it's not about religion, it's about having a relationship with God. And as that first year, which was a tricky year for her, she came through it at some point nearer the end. I think that discovery started to happen at the end of her first year, where she started to think about wanting to ditch being a Sikh and consider another faith altogether.
Wow. And that's pretty massive in a family where you are Sikh, that's what you are.
And I just ditched everything for nothing. Does that make sense? She was kind of transferring. I still maintain at that point I was very strongly an atheist feminist for sure, and believed in some of the Marxist ideas of religion being the opium of the masses as such. And when she came along and she said, Pam, I'm considering becoming a Christian, I love my sister, so I just turned around and I said, Sue, whatever makes you happy, that makes me happy. because I just thought, I love you and I want you to be happy in your life, because actually it's been a rough ride for both of us as being women and girls in this sort of background. It's not been easy. And I just thought, if that brings you solitude in some way and peace in some way, go for it. And it's not, I don't think she was asking my permission. I just think she was just trying to
kind of process what was going on.
Process what was going on in her own life as such. And so at some point, I don't know what point before she came home, she definitely had become a Christian. And she hadn't quietly shared that she'd become that, but her behaviours had changed to demonstrate that she had become that.
So what kind of things were you observing in your sister?
Yeah, so for me, it just, the transformation was, and it grew stronger with the passing year, she had such peace about her. And she had a lot of tough things going on in her life, but she would just pray and she would just ask God for help. And she would just say, it's going to be okay, because God, my Father, will answer these prayers. And I just thought, I've never heard that. And I still was thinking, that's for you. This is for me. Yeah. And I was thinking, that's okay. If that's what's going on with your life, that's not a problem. I'm happy for you.
So you're happy kind of whatever floats your boat. If this is going to do you good, make you feel good, you go for it.
Yeah.
I'll choose something, whatever will make me
Yeah, I mean, mine was like, I'm going to take on the world, I'm going to fight everybody with my ideologies.
Did you have any t-shirts to go with it? Some nice
No, I didn't, but I did get involved with a couple of things I shouldn't have got involved with.
Do you want to share one?
So when I went away to university, I went on a march. It was a feminist march, which, you know, was going to be at night, and we were going to tell the world that, you know, they're all wrong, etc. There were about 5 of us making a noise, and nobody was listening, so it was really embarrassing. But yeah, that's
good effort. It's good effort. Yeah.
So yeah, that's my sister's journey to being a Christian.
So you were noticing differences in her, and then you yourself went off to university as well. So a couple of years later.
About a year or so later, I went off to university, and this was my break. This was me leaving home, and I remember being resolute in my thought. And I don't share things out loud with anyone. I thought, I'm never coming back. After I've done university, I'm not coming back to this family home. I'm going to live life my own way. I wanted to be in charge, I wanted to be in control, I wanted to make the decisions, I wanted to be accountable for my decisions. That was a big thing for me, because I had a lot of cousins in my life who had arranged marriages and they hadn't gone well. And because they hadn't gone well, either they got the blame, or the in-laws got the blame, or someone else got the blame. There was always somebody's, and I just thought, let me make the decisions, and if it goes wrong, then that's on me. Yeah. And I've always had that sort of mentality about myself. If it's gone wrong, it's on me. And that was okay for me to do that. And I didn't want to get married. That was resolute in that. And I thought, I don't want to get married. I'll have a relationship, but I'm never going to get married, ever. In that respect. And I went off to university, Essex University.
Great. My wife's from Essex. What a place.
Don't go there. No, I'm joking. And I went away to university that first year with big dreams, big hopes, breaking the chains, so to speak, and, you know, taking on the world, so to speak.
Yeah. You could have gone to Basildon, Bas Vegas is known as, isn't it? That's where you live the dream. But yeah, so you went out, and did you kind of basically in that first kind of year, first term, just kind of go, let me just explore a different life, how was that first term for you?
So for the first term and a half, I literally did what I wanted, when I wanted, and how I wanted to. And it wasn't wild, I wasn't that kind of lass. I never wanted to get drunk, that was a flat out no for me. Clubbing wasn't a thing for me. I just wanted, I think, the freedom to make choices that would be very normal for a majority of you, which was, I'd like to do a sport, you know, I'd like to be able to study this topic, I'd like to be able to go to the restaurant with a friend. Those are things we never grew up with. My sister and I didn't go out in the evenings. We came home from school, did the family meal, did our homework and went to bed. That was my days growing up, and that's okay. That's, you know, we were helping mum, actually had 2 jobs, and dad was on the night shift, not a problem at all. But I wanted to live life, I wanted to experience something, I wanted friends as well. It didn't go well. I literally sank, and I hadn't realised how hard it would be. I think when you're brought up in quite a closed, not necessarily shelter, but protective environment, you haven't developed certain skills, and I hadn't developed the skills to know how to make wise decisions and what to get involved with and not to get involved with, who to kind of make friends with. or how to make friends with people. So I was actually, sadly, really deeply lonely and sad. I hated my degree. I loved my A-level sociology and history, but I hated my history degree. I did history and sociology, and I loved the sociology side, but the history side I just found boring.
Right.
And I found out I wasn't an academic, so that doesn't help either.
No. So everything was going quite pear-shaped.
Yeah,
and then
very.
But you kind of started asking your sister questions, did you now? And questioning her about the Christian faith.
Yeah. So you imagine our lives from the same home. Her like she had stuff going on, but she was just like this, steady. I was just like this the whole way through that first. I was like, how do you do this? How do you live life? How do you live? Where's the guidebook? Nobody gives that. I suppose it's like mothers, when they say, "Where's a guidebook to be a parent?" It's that kind of thing. You have to learn to navigate, and I was very bad. So I ended up, because I was so sad, I just ended up going to Wolverhampton, which is where she was, and I'd go and see her and just spend some time with her, because this was a person I knew who loved me. I felt safe with her. We spoke in the same way. We had the same interests with each other, and we just wanted to do simple things like go to the cinema or whatever it was to enjoy. So I went to spend time with her, and she was living with a missionary at the time.
Oh, wow.
And both of them, I was just my usual annoying self, really, as a little sister. Just asking questions about their faith and trying to pick it apart, trying to disprove it in some ways.
So were these kind of genuine questions, or they were kind of part genuine, part just...
Yeah, part genuine, part
mixed.
just me being a nuisance, I think. So, for example, in the Sikh faith, you have to do a lot of bowing down. You bow down to your elderly relatives, you touch their feet to show a sign of respect. When you go to the temple, you bow down to their book, and you sit. There's certain things that you have to do, and there are pictures around in the house of the gurus, and you bow to those, or you do incense around them. And in that particular house she was living with a missionary, there was a cross on the wall, and I can remember specifically asking, amongst many things, but particularly this one, I said, well, you bow down to the cross, don't you? Because it's there and you've got it up on the wall. And I remember them explaining to me, we don't bow down to the cross, it's a symbol of reminding us of who Jesus is and what he's done for us. And basically every argument or point I wanted to pick apart, they were able to kind of counteract in some ways, and there were small points.
Did that annoy you, or were you kind of quite intrigued?
I couldn't quite win, and I like to win sometimes, but I was losing on this account. So I kind of spent a lot of time going back to see her, and she just grew steady and strong in her faith. She began to talk about God being her father, God being a character who is faithful, God being someone who is kind, who is merciful, who is gracious, who is patient and waits and is loving and is relentless in his love for his people, and that he doesn't fail you in the way you think he's going to fail you. And all of a sudden, the way she was talking about having a relationship with God the Father, I just sat there and thought, okay, something slightly different is going on in this conversation. I remember going back to university one time and just talking to somebody there. And this is bearing in mind that I've just said, no, he doesn't exist. It's all man-made. I just remember talking to this guy and just saying, I know I don't know God, but I know that she does. And I was just resolute. I knew she knew God because she was able to talk about his attributes. In the Sikh faith, no one talks about his attributes. He doesn't have a name as such, and you don't know anything about him. What you get told, or what I was told, forgive me, is that this is our religion, this is what we do, and there is a God. But you don't know who he is, and you don't know how to get to know him.
But here was your sister calling him father.
Given the type, my dad was a strict disciplinarian. That is just guys of that generation and age. They're trying to protect their daughters to not go off and do something wild, and I get that. But this was a father she talked about who was loving, which was something I hadn't really experienced in the same way. And I just thought, okay, I know she knows God, but I know that I don't know God. And that was a kind of a real moment for me, I think, to start considering.
And it led you to kind of 3 big questions that you wanted answered. Can you tell us a bit about what those questions were and whether they got answered?
Yeah, so looking at my sister's life and how that had changed, I just sat there and thought, hang on a minute. You're throwing it all away. You're throwing it all away. Maybe you need to look at this again. Maybe you need to make an informed decision. And I just thought, fine, I'll make an informed decision. And I had 3 very clear questions. Again, I didn't share with anyone because that's not what I would do. And one was, does God actually exist, the way my sister was discussing? And I wanted to know if he actually existed. The second was, how do you get to know him? And the third was, who's this Jesus guy? I don't get where he fits in the picture at all, because I'd never heard of him. He doesn't come up in the Sikh faith at all. So I couldn't understand those 3 questions. And those were the 3 that I was going to investigate and look into, because I was determined to make whatever decision I made, it was my decision and it was on me, whatever the choice. So if all of those were answered in a way that says, yes, he does exist and yes, you can get to know him, somehow Jesus fits into this, I had a choice of going, okay, I believe, I'll follow you, or I have a choice of saying, no, I won't, no thank you. But both of those were my decision to make. I think because I'd never had my decisions for myself, they were big things for me to do.
You wanted to be in control of your own mind and decisions.
Yes, and then I'm accountable for my decisions. That was a big thing for me. So that's how that journey started. And I just remember the visits to her just starting to become slightly more frequent maybe, and spending a bit more time with her and her friend. And trying to unpick it apart. I mean, I was still a nuisance. Sorry to have to say that, you know. She was very patient with me, and I'd come to a point from probably in the spring term of my first year where I just thought, okay, he does exist. I agree with that now. So the whole idea of religion being a man-made concept, I hadn't quite work that one out, but because he existed, so I couldn't work out the religion bit. I thought, okay, you definitely exist, because I can see that in the way you are with my sister. She's a different person. But surely all paths lead to God, like my mum had said really early on in my life when I was a junior kid at school. You know, I just thought maybe that religion and that religion, we all kind of go on our little venture. Up is always a mountain for me. Up a mountain, you know, and you get to the top. You'll all get to the same point. So all of these religions will get you to that point. And I can remember asking that question for quite a while in my head, thinking, well, don't all paths just lead to God? You do exist. Haven't you created all of these religions? Haven't you? You know, so it's a colourful kind of reflection of your character in some way, shape or form. And as the train was pulling into a station on the way to Wolverhampton, a couple of nuns got on my train in my carriage, which I found really weird because I've never seen any nuns.
Bit of sister act.
Yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg there, Sister Wendy making an appearance.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, they could have been going to, you know, a party, but it was daylight, so I don't think they would have been. And then as the window pulled up, to the left was the billboard, and on there, as I was asking that question, was the billboard that just said, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth and the life, and no one can come to the Father except through me. Wow. Which was John's gospel, which I didn't know at the time. And I just thought, that's a question I've had for a while, and that is a question you are answering just there. There's the window and there's the billboard, the poster, and I just went, okay.
That's pretty powerful. Yes, you're asking that question. You're wanting an answer, and there it is. It's not just sob away or whatever McDonald's been advertised. It's this verse that says that Jesus is the way to the Father. Yeah. The only way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got it. I understood it, and I thought, you answer questions because you've heard mine, and I can see that you've answered my question. And that was like the springtime, and that then was a catalyst for a further conversations with my sister for me to have, and it was in the summer. The big thing was in the summer when she came home. So it's the end of my first year. She'd been a Christian by about a year now, I think, possibly at uni. So she knew her faith more, I had seen her change. I'd seen how happy she was, how content she was, how at peace she was. And she had a lot of stuff going on in her life, and she was still steady. And I was like, oh, just not a steady character. And in that summer, when she came home, which was my first year back from uni, things just took an intense kind of turn, which was a great thing for me. So she'd come home deliberately to tell my parents about the Lord Jesus and to tell them more about the Christian faith. And as she spent time talking to them, I spent time listening to her do that. And I can just remember that summer, it was June, July, and I can just remember thinking, okay, I need to know more now, more than I already know. And I asked her for a Bible. And she did. She got hold of a Bible for me, which I was really grateful for. And I thought, well, fine. If I want to know God, why don't I read his book about him? If I want to know the God of the Bible, I need to read his book, his words. What does he say
logical way
about,
to do it,
about himself? Now, books, for me as a teacher, work from page 1, and they go through in an order. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but that's what I think.
You're a teacher, so of course we agree. Yes.
So I ended up starting on page 1, which was just Genesis, and I read the first 3 chapters and only the first 3 chapters, because it actually gets quite hard after that and you need help understanding a bit more of the story.
Yeah, so Genesis, the book of beginnings.
Yes.
So there is the right place to start for sure.
Yeah,
so chapters 1 to 3.
Yeah, chapters 1 to 3. And in there, for the first time in my whole entire life, I was 20 years old, coming up to 20, I was still 19. And I just read for the first time several truths that resounded with me. The first was, God had made the earth, the heavens, and everything in the earth, and there was a created order. And I love order, believe it or not, as I'm a teacher, but I love order. And he had also made mankind, and he had also made mankind to know how to relate to him, but also to relate to each other, and also to relate to the whole of the earth. And everything that's in it, they were given to be stewards of. And I just thought, what a wonderful, wonderful picture. But the bit that blew me away, that resonated with me, were the parts where he talks about Adam and Eve and how they are made for each other and what marriage looks like. Yeah. And I thought, so that's what marriage looks like. When you get married, you are to submit to one another, you are to look after one another. Eve is to be his helper, you, the wife, are to be his helper, and he is there to lead you and care for you and support you. And actually you are one unit, which in the Sikh faith it wasn't that, because when you got married, you married everybody, and the overall authority would be your father and mother-in-law in your life. Wow. If it wasn't the grandparents.
Yeah, so very different.
Which I couldn't do because I am a rebellious character, so authority is an issue. But that was amazing, and I thought that makes so much more sense of why communication would be better, of how you would relate, of how actually your marriage would work, had the potential to work better in that respect. And I thought there was just a harmony about the whole way in which God had created the world and everything in it. There was an order in there, and I just thought, what a blueprint, a blueprint to life itself.
So you were absolutely amazed by how what the Bible says makes sense of who God is, who we are, why we're here, what we're to do, how we're to live. A whole bunch of things answered in basically one little chapter, on two little chapters. Yeah. There was something else that in chapter 3 there where you suddenly started to think about, so why is the world such a mess? Yeah, brilliant. So in chapter 3 he talks about the fall, which is where Adam basically says, Adam and Eve end up eating from a tree that they're not supposed to have eaten from with his commands, and they disobey him. And from that one little action, and it's not about eating from the tree as such, it's more about the action, which is to say, actually, which resonates with my story, I want to be in charge, and I want to be in control. They were showing exactly what my heart was showing in the same way, and I just thought, actually, that's how I relate to the world, is I want to do it my way. So the minute they did that, sin entered the world, and sin is basically you saying, I want to be in control and in charge of my life, and I want to be my own God and my own king, and I don't want you, who's created everything, to be in control of me at all. And
the fall just made a lot more sense. The sin in the world, the suffering in the world, the tears, the pain, the fighting, the bickering, the moment when you've just had that dislike to somebody you love, it all makes more sense at that point. And I just thought, yeah, I get why the world is such a messy place now, because of that one action.
Rooted in us then putting that crown on our own heads. Such,
And I can't. Yeah, Genesis 1-3 made a massive impact in me understanding. And at that point, that's when my investigations, we'll call it, intensified, and I started talking to my sister more, and I was ask her a question, well, how did you come to know God? And she would use the language of, because this is how she was spoken to, I was called. And to me that was quite an airy-fairy language. I don't struggle with emotions, I have a lot of those, but I struggle with emotional language because I like things rooted. And I was thinking, so how were you called? How do you get called? I believe he exists. I believe his word to be true from Genesis 1-3. I believe in the billboard message that I've heard, and every question that I have in my head, that first one, does God exist, has been answered. But how do you get the big how? How do you go from knowing he exists, you believe he exists, and then you want that relationship? I wanted the relationship my sister had. It really scared me because she didn't need me anymore, so that scared me because we were tight growing up. I'm kind of a support for one another. She didn't need, I felt like my safety net had gone, and she had somebody and I had no one. But I could see how beautiful her relationship with God was, and I thought, but I want that. And I didn't think I didn't know how you got called. I got why she got called. I would get why my brothers would get called. My sister taught herself to read. She's just intelligent. She's bright. She's talented. She's gifted. She's got nous about her. She's kind. She's compassionate. I'm slightly more not talented, not gifted. Failed my GCSEs, redid them, got the same amount I got the first time round, but by God's grace, I am actually a teacher now, so it's not all that bad.
You can empathise with the kids.
Exactly. But I had nothing to offer. I'm a fiery character. I'm not patient. I'm not, I am kind to a degree, but I'm actually just fiery. If my parents would say this, she's fiery, that one's fiery. And I am a fiery person. So I was just like, I've got nothing to offer you. I've got no academic skills, God, to offer you. I've got no talents to offer you. Can't kick a football, so I'm not going to be a brilliant footballer. I can't, I went to change a light fitting and I broke the whole fitting and had to get the electrician to... Sorry, that's
funny.
But it all goes wrong with me. And so there was just nothing I could offer him. No talents to offer him at all, and I was just stuck on this how question.
So how did you deal with that? What did you do? Because I know you went along to church with.
So that summer I went along to church with my sister. We went to a Baptist church, and I remember asking her, I said, how do you get called? And she went, Pam, what are you expecting, a thunderbolt to hit you out the blue? And I went, yeah, actually, if God could just break in, speak directly to me, that would be brilliant. What I didn't know, he was already doing that through the billboard, through his word, Genesis 1-3. I hadn't realised that's what he was doing. And I can't remember if it was that Sunday or the Sunday after, but it was pretty close to that conversation. And we went to church, and I'll never forget the pastor, Tim, brilliant, I'm saying lad, he's quite young, and he was able to explain the gospel about how you go from where you are to a relationship with God, and he showed this picture, which was really good.
On the screen.
Yes, that's the picture. So on that side, it had the word man, and on that side there was God. And finally, just a graphic picture like that just really helped me to understand all I need to do is put my trust in who this Jesus is, who is the Son of God, and to trust that he will carry me over to God. And it's through him that I can have that relationship. Now that goes back to that billboard message, which had, Jesus said, I am the way.
Yeah.
I am the way.
So that's a picture of that verse.
Yeah, that is that picture of that verse. I'm finding that verse made a lot more sense to me, and I went, I believe you are the only way that I can have a relationship with the sovereign God of the Bible. And the pastor asked, it was a youth service. I mean, I was 19 at the time. There were no youth there. There was just me and my sister. And so he called anybody forward, And there was only about less than 10 people in the building at the time. And I went forward because I was just moved to tears, because I thought, I want this relationship. I want a relationship with God, and I can see how I can have that is by putting my trust in who the Lord Jesus is, who is the Son of God, who is the only way to God. And so I went forward, they prayed for me, asked me a few questions, etc. And I just remember saying, I want this relationship with God. I want to be in a relationship. I don't want to reject him anymore. I don't want to say he doesn't exist. And the question of religion being a man-made wasn't even on my plate at the point.
Yeah, because you'd seen lots of your questions answered over these years of actually rigorously investigating and looking into it and asking and thinking.
And I did that, and bounced out of church with my sister, thrilled, absolutely thrilled, elated. I don't, imagine you get your A stars or whatever it is at, A level, and you just.
I was going to say, you have to imagine that.
Yeah, you have to imagine that, because I didn't get those.
Same here, actually.
And walking home, and I just thought, brilliant, I have a relationship with God. And then my sister broke my bubble.
How did she burst the bubble?
She burst the bubble, and she just said, Pam, you need to repent. So they hadn't picked that up in the church. That's okay, but she was astute enough to pick that up, and she went, you need to repent. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, you need to say sorry to God for your sin of rejecting him in the first place, or I think maybe it might have just been just sin, but definitely not having him in my life. And I just turned around and I said, no. I said, I haven't done anything wrong.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah, just a bit of an intake of breath there. And I remember walking home with her, just thinking, but I haven't done anything wrong. I might have done a few things here and there. I've lied, I've stolen a couple of times, but I haven't done anything massively wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think. I'm not been in prison, etc. So my understanding of sin wasn't anywhere close to where it should have been, and my sister was trying to help me with that.
But you'd gone from this massive high of thinking, great, I've got this relationship with God, to actually then going, hang on.
15 minutes later,
so
I was
massive
back on
crash.
So
what did you do about that? Because that must be with your head and your heart, you must have been all over the show.
Well, I wasn't very happy with my sister, to say the least. I remember going home, and I was adamant. I just kept saying, I'm not doing it. And a full week, I have never had a week like it, and I pray that I never have a week like it again. It was a full week of me wrestling with God, of where I had this amazing experience of coming to an understanding of the Lord Jesus being the Son of God and putting my trust in him and having a relationship with God, to now I couldn't have that, and that's what I desperately wanted. But yet I wouldn't say sorry for the fact that I had rejected him in the first place as my God, because I wanted to be my own God. I didn't sleep. I literally did not sleep for a full week. I think I may have got a couple of hours here and there. And I was just summer job, working at Sainsbury's.
Oh, brilliant. Collecting the nectar points.
Well, it wasn't nectar in there, so I was a little bit older than that. And I remember just going to work every day feeling exhausted. And I was working in the staff canteen at the time. And I was adamant. And my sister had approached me in the week a couple of times to say, Pam, have you considered this? And I was just, no, I'm not doing it. But I couldn't enter into I wasn't in that state of peace that my sister had. I could see I was in a different place. And I remember I was in Sainsbury's canteen, making a Black Forest Gatto.
Wow.
Yeah.
The canteen clearly get better food than the public.
Yeah, possibly.
You're making a Black Forest Gatto.
Making a Black Forest Gatto, and I was exhausted. I was mentally exhausted, physically exhausted. And I just sat there and I thought, and I turned 20 by now. And I just thought, I can't do this. I can't have this fight anymore. I want this peace. And all I need to do is say sorry. So I went over to left the Black Forest Gatto. People needed serving. And I went over to the payphone. I said, I'll be back in a minute. I went over to the payphone, picked up the payphone, phoned my sister, and I said, could you go and get that booklet that they gave you that's got the repentance prayer in it, because I need to say it. And she just went, what now?
So that's not the reaction.
No. So I'm having an amazing moment of, I'm about ready to confess my sins. I'm about ready to say sorry to the God of the heavens and the earth, who's made all of us and everything in it. And that was the response. I went, okay. I put the phone down, went back to my Black Forest ghetto, and I just remember, I just said sorry. I said, I'm sorry that I've been this stubborn. I'm sorry that I've rejected you. I'm sorry that I didn't accept you. I'm sorry that I wasn't willing to be quicker at saying. So all of that went through my head. Said it, and the minute I said it, the weight off my back came off. Like there was just a whole sheet of weight just off, and my back just felt light at that point. And I just was deeply, and I knew then I was there. I was in a relationship with God, and I was
set free.
Free from my sin and saved. And I was just absolutely thankful for that.
Oh, that's incredible.
Really thankful.
Yeah. And your sister, I take it, was actually when you actually talked to her then, she was chuffed a bit.
Eventually, when I got home at the end of the day. But it just meant I finally understood that actually in order to enter into a relationship with God, you've got to be willing to say sorry for the fact you never wanted him as your God, as your father, as your ruler, as your king at the end of the day. And the only way you can do that is to accept the death that Jesus took on the cross, which was explained to me in the sermon, is that actually in order for me to be there, I need to accept that Jesus' death on the cross, he took the punishment for my wrongdoing, for my sin in the first place. So that I was able to then have that.
Brilliant. Yes, there's a lot more clarity in what Jesus has done and what it means. Yeah, and so that word repent, it means, doesn't it, to change your mind and then you turn to believe in Jesus. So that's wonderful to hear. How your sister was over the moon.
Instrumental.
How about your parents though? How about the rest of your family? How did they respond? Because obviously a traditional Sikh family, and this is obviously quite alien.
Yeah, so that day, the Black Forest Ghetto day, I went home and
BFG.
BFG. I went home and I sat in the front room. We've got 2 rooms, and I sat in the front room and I sat down and I just went, I'm not telling him. I'm not telling him because I didn't want the repercussions. I didn't want him hating me, I didn't want him rejecting me, I didn't want to be kicked out of the house, and I didn't want the fallout because I didn't know what the repercussions would be. I didn't know how he was going to react. Even though they knew my sister was a Christian, they walked tenderly, carefully with her, but I didn't know what they were going to do with me. I don't know why I thought that, and I sat down on the sofa and I just remember sitting there saying to myself, everything's to myself by the way, I'm not doing it. My sister wasn't there at the time. I'm not doing it. No, I'm not doing it. This was my conversation with God. I'm not doing it.
No.
My dad walked in and he just looked at me and he just said, you've become a Christian, haven't you? so that was taken out of my hands.
Wow.
And I just said yes, because I thought if I don't do it now, I probably never will. So I said yes. His response to that, which was very sad, was, well, I was born as a Sikh and I'm going to die as a Sikh. That was his response to me becoming a Christian. He never alienated me after that. He understood as the years went on that we did believe in God, and he was actually very proud of both my sister and I, which I'm deeply grateful for, because we'd never heard that from him. That's not language we grew up with as such, and so that was nice to hear that he was never ashamed of us for having made that decision, because he could see he had made it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
But my mum, she went ballistic, not at me, she went ballistic at the pastor who dropped me off on the street, shouting and screaming at him in part English, part Punjabi. And he was very gracious, and he dropped us off after I can't remember, it was the Thursday evening or something, there'd been a club on, dropped us off, and she went mad at him, and he drove away. He was he never brought it up again. And we, tender hooks with Mum, we were always tender hooks, because we never knew what she wanted to say. And I think she was just deeply disappointed. I think she was deeply embarrassed and ashamed, possibly, that we'd moved away, because this was quite a damning thing in the Sikh culture, to leave your family and to do something else. It's not heard of. Back then, I later found out, many years later, we were discussed at length amongst my extended family, and I hadn't realised that. My brothers, on the other hand, came down. I used to sleep on the sofa in my uni days. I used to come home because there weren't enough beds. So I used to sleep on the sofa, and my brother came down not soon after me converting, so somewhere in August, because I'd converted early August, I think it was, came down and woke me up, and he had a knife.
Cool.
But he wouldn't hurt a fly. He's absolutely beautiful. And he was mad at me for doing it. He says, you've embarrassed us, you've ashamed us, you need to convert back now. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. And his threat wasn't to me, his threat was to himself. If you don't do it, I'm going to cut myself. And I just thought, well, you're not going to do that, because there's no way you would. I know you well enough to know that you wouldn't. Then the youngest came down.
You're very chilled out about this.
Yeah, I'm not doing it. Then the youngest came down, and he's a litigator now. Gosh, that guy can argue. And he literally argued with me left, right and centre. That woke Mum up. Dad was night shift, so thankfully he wasn't there. That woke Mum up. She came down. There was more hysterics going on in the household. And she was worried about the eldest. Because I always say this, he's a favourite. It's okay, I'm not hurt by that at all. And she managed to calm it all down and get us all back off to bed, kind of thing and stuff. And I think in the wisdom of parents being parents, they just thought this was a phase for us and we'd come out of it. Actually, they realised it wasn't a phase, and we did end up believing in a God that is real, and their understanding of that differed. I then asked my sister the next morning, I said, did you not hear the ruckus that was going on? She went, yeah, but I thought you could handle it. Another moment, I could have done with her there. And she did. So that's kind of how things played out at the end of the day. But for me to have gone from the atheist, the believing Sikh, to the atheist, feminist, Marxist last to,
it's quite a journey.
It's quite a journey to believe in a God who has saved me, not because I deserve it, but because his son has done it for me. It blows me away at the end of the day, and I know that I'm in safe, secure hands, and you just feel at peace. You get things thrown at you left, right and centre. It's not like life's easy. You get stuff thrown at you, but who you are is very rooted and steady in a faithful God who is already rooted and steady in his own character.
That's so good to hear. I'm just ending each interview with this kind of final question, where you've talked really brilliantly about you're now in this relationship with God through Jesus. The question I'm asking every night is, what does Jesus mean to you now, here in 2025?
Just everything. Without him, I think my whole identity is wrapped up in him. I've come to grow to understand God's amazing grace, how the depth of his mercy and grace in the Lord Jesus. And if I wasn't wrapped up in his righteousness, I wouldn't even get a chance to see the glory of our Heavenly Father, which I'm looking forward to in one day. So he's my Lord, my Saviour, my everything.
That's amazing. Should we give Pam a round of applause? If you need to have a quick shuffle on these lovely wooden chairs, then feel free to do that. My shuffle is standing up here. It was great to hear Pam share her story and be so open and honest about what's gone on. I've said every night this week we're doing a short talk afterwards, just to think we've heard what Jesus means to Pam and what he's done for her, but what does Jesus mean for you? What does he mean for me? And each night we're thinking about something that comes up in the Bible, which kind of addresses some of the issues that have been raised. And I think one of the things, there's loads of things I find interesting about Pam's story, but one of the things is this whole idea of freedom. Where do you find where real life is? Was it in Sikhism? Was it in feminism, Marxism? Was it in atheism? Or is it in Jesus? And there's this kind of question of where do we find real life? Where can we really fly in our lives? And to get us thinking about this, I want to take us back really to Berlin. And I want to take us back, if you remember Marty McFly, or maybe you don't, but you should watch it if you've never seen it. What a film. Back to the Future. He goes back in time, this DeLorean. And I want to take us back, if you like, with Doc Brown's DeLorean, and go back to a time which is 1989. So 1989, Berlin, and you'll remember, it was when the Berlin Wall fell. And it was about the 9th of November that took place. And all of a sudden, people were thinking, perhaps this will be the end of communism, and the world will be good again, everything will be hunky-dory, democracy will rule everywhere. And to usher in the new decade, because this is right 1989, right at the end, to usher in the new decade, on New Year's Eve, both East Germans and West Germans were there uniting on the wall, and they decided to get the legend that was David Hasselhoff to come and sing for them. See, David Hasselhoff, you don't know, he was incredibly popular. His singing voice was incredibly popular anywhere where people spoke German, and absolutely nowhere where people did not speak German. But here was David Hasselhoff. He was there to sing his popular song, Looking for Freedom. And he was hoisted up on this like cherry picker, this fire engine thing. And he's hoisted up above the wall. He's there in his leather jacket, his piano keyboard scarf around his neck, his hair all permed. A rocket goes off, almost lights it off. But then he starts belting out his classic, Looking for Freedom. And it was all about a young man driving off into the distant horizon, going to find himself, to find who he truly is, being free to do what he wants, to be who he wants to be. And that's what that song was about, and everyone was loving it. Go David Hasselhoff, carry on singing, mate. And it was ushering in and really symbolic of what was about to happen. People were thinking this will be now, this new era, a post-conflict age where we won't have the wars, we won't have the fighting. People will come on board with democracy, people power, and it will all be good. And you can all go out and find yourselves and be who you want to be. And I think we are shaped as a society in a world by that dream. Not really shaped by David Hasselhoff, but he was tapping into something that was the spirit of the age. That you want to just know who you are and do what you want to do and find your real self. And we live in a world, and we have for a few decades now, where there seems to be like this drunkenness of options out there. You can choose anything. It's a bit like what Pam was initially like with her sister, where she was like, well, if that makes you happy, you go for it. And if that makes you happy, you go for it. And we're like, well, there's so many options we could go for. We're like a kid in a candy shop. And yet, how have most people found living life in this way? I think for most, we've descended down into this pit where we just don't know who we are. We thought we'd find ourselves. We thought we could choose, and we thought, actually, that would be good and our lives would be great if we could just be free to be me. But actually, we don't find real freedom there. But there's a deep desire in us for freedom, to really be liberated. So what do we do? What do we do when we hear constantly and we're drip-fed this idea that freedom is doing what you want? As Elsa legendarily put it in her song, no right, no wrong, no rules for me, I'm free. That's the notion of what it means to be free that we're so often told in our world and in our culture. That freedom is discovering me, it's looking within. If I only look within, I'll find the answers. The answers aren't out there in my parents or politics or religion. The answers are inside. Freedom is discovering me. And it's been drip-fed to us over the years, all the way back to The Wizard of Oz. I think it was 1939. What's the answer? What's the great central theme of The Wizard of Oz? It's you don't have to look for answers out there, look within. The guy with the weird funnel head, you thought you didn't have a heart. Well, actually, look within, you find you always had one all along. The answers are there. The guy, the lion, who's got a kind of hairdo that looks a bit like my nan's hairdo, and with all the curlers. Look within, you'll find the answers. You think you don't have courage, just look within, you'll find it. That's what we've been drip-fed for years and years and years. You just find the answers within, and that is what real freedom is. So what does Jesus have to say to Elsa? What does he have to say to Pam all those years ago? What does he have to say to us tonight about real freedom? Well, I want to pick up on a bit where this week we're sometimes dipping into one of the biographies of Jesus' life, and it's called John's Gospel, and these are free at the back if you want to get yourself a hold of a copy. And it's one of the biographies, I say, of Jesus' life. John was a good friend of Jesus, and he wrote down what happened for us so we could read it and see and trust in Jesus for ourselves. And I want to pick up on a little bit from that, and don't worry if you can't read the words too much, I'll read them out now. But it's a snippet of a story where Jesus has been doing loads of miracles, people have been hearing his teaching, they're kind of jaw-dropped, they're bobby-dazzled by what he's been saying, amazed by him, and then we pick up this. It says, to the Jews who had believed Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we're Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we should be set free? Jesus replied, very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I just want to pick up on a few of those things that Jesus is talking about there. But the first kind of big thing he's going with is that freedom is very different to what you and I think it is. If we've been brought up on the Elsa diet of freedom is looking within, going with the flow, following your heart, then Jesus comes along and he says, actually, it's not that. Freedom's very different to what we think. Listen again to what he says. If you hold to my teaching, you're really my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. When he says the truth, he's on about capital T truth, not as we so often hear in celebrity interviews, my truth, which is just my personal feelings, my personal take on something. He's talking about capital T truth, as in stuff that's true, whether I believe it, whether you believe it or not, but stuff that remains true. That's true for all people, in all times, in all places. And he says if we hear the truth as it is, as we see life as it really is, which comes from what he says, then we will be really set free in our lives. Now, as you hear that, our natural reaction, I think, is to get a bit narky with that and a bit twitchy and go, oh, that's... If someone comes in and tells me this is the way to live, with capital T truth, that's going to restrict me, it's going to clip my wings, and I'm not going to be able to fly, I'm not going to be able to thrive, I'm not going to be able to be truly free. But the fact of the matter is that every single person in life, no matter where you're coming from tonight, all of us, we're all making truth claims all the time. Whether you are a Sikh religion or a Hindu religion or Islamic religion or Christian religion or atheism or agnostic, wherever you are on the whole spectrum of worldviews and beliefs, we all are on there somewhere. Every single one of us makes truth claims, things that we think are true for all people in all times and in all places. The Dalai Lama, who looks a bit like the old Archbishop of Canterbury on the picture there, he once said, I remember reading it, I think it was back in 2001, he said in an interview, he said, listen to this, he said, whether Hindu or Muslim or Christian, it is wrong to try to convert. And for many of us, we go, yeah, that sounds like a noble, very generous, magnanimous thing to do and say. But what's he trying to do when he says it's wrong to try to convert? He's trying to convert us to his way of thinking. He's saying the world would be better if you believed what I believe, the truth that I'm now telling you. And I think that's unavoidable. Every one of us believes there are things that we should all believe, and if we all believed it, the world would be a better place. So, silly example. Next door we've got, is it Pat's Pizza? Well, imagine if Pat's Pizzas decided to expand their business a bit and go into Pat's Pies and Pizza. And they decided to create their own little pie society next door. Now, if they went to do that, they'd be saying, look, we're about pies in our society. We talk about them, we eat them, we sample them, but we're here to talk about pies. Now, imagine someone else comes in with a bag of Haribo and they say, in the pie society, can we talk about these? These are really delicious. Now, you'd have to say to them, yeah, we love Haribo, they're tang-fastic, they're amazing. But we're not really here to talk about Haribo, we're here to talk about pies. Frey Bentos pies, pucker pies, short crust pastry pies, puff pastry pies, chicken and mushroom pies. But we're here to talk about pies. You see, in that pie society, there are the things that are okay and things that are not okay, things that are in and things that are out. And it's true of every single belief system. There are things that you can believe and things you can't believe, things you can do, things you can't do. And what I'm saying is that when someone comes along and says this is the truth, we're all doing it. And so if there are constant truth claims everywhere, the big question is, which is true? And I love Pam's journey of just trying to grapple with, well, what is true? God, are you there? If you are, can I know you? What are you like? And who is Jesus? All these questions, these big questions, which are absolutely foundational for us in our lives too. The question is, which is true? Jesus says, hold to my teaching, you're really my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And when Jesus says this, he said, if you hear me and believe me, and then live with me as your Lord, then that's when you'll be free. And the question is that right? It's either, I put to you, it's either the height of arrogance or it's the height of accuracy. It's one or the other. I'm convinced when you look at Jesus, it's the height of accuracy. He's telling the truth. If we hear him and believe him and trust in him and hand our lives over to him, then he will really set us free. So that's the first thing. Jesus says that freedom is very different to what we think. It's not following our heart, but it's following his. The second thing he does is what we see in these next verses. How are they going to respond? How would we respond? Well, they answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we should be set free? Jesus replied, very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. So the second big kind of gobsmacker that he throws in there is this: you're not as free as you think. And the people, the Jews who are listening to this, were really riled by this. They didn't like this. They said, hang on, you're saying we're not free? Jesus, what's your beef? What's your problem with us? Why are you saying that we're slaves? They said, we've never been slaves of anyone. But you didn't have to be Sherlock Holmes to look back in their history and go, actually, they've been slaves quite a few times. You all remember the kind of the classic kind of Egyptian situation where the Israelites were enslaved to Egypt. And then they were enslaved as they came out of that to some other kind of local groups like Philistines and stuff at different points. But then the big superpowers of the day, like in the 700s Assyria and in the 500s Babylon, and then you had the Grecians, and then in the very day, and the Persians, and in the very day they were actually living in, they were slaves to the Romans. And so when they say, Jesus, look at our pedigree, we're people of Abraham, we've never been slaves of anyone, Jesus is like, you have been slaves, and what about even now? Maybe that's our reaction as well when Jesus says to us, we're not as free as we think. We're thinking, look, we're from the Shire of Bedford. We're free people. We're free thinkers. You know, I'm not a slave to anyone. I think for myself, thanks very much. I'm offended, Jesus, quite frankly, by what you say. But the truth of the matter is that none of us truly think for ourselves perfectly, purely, objectively. We all are influenced by our upbringing. We're all influenced by the books we read, or the Kindles we read, if you're into Kindles. We're all influenced by the films we watch and the TV programs we see, the YouTube channels you subscribe to, the social media we're on. We're all influenced by those things. We all know it. Millions of psychologists have made that point 1,000 times over. And so when we say, actually, I think for myself, I'm really quite free, actually, we're not. We're following so often what others are saying. Jesus comes in and he says, you're not free. Actually, let me tell you the truth, he says. You're actually enslaved to sin. And again, that's like something which we don't really want to hear, but what he's saying really is that if we're enslaved to sin, that sin is our master. That is, it directs you. It directs how you live. It directs how you speak. It directs how you function. It directs how you function in your family and at school or at college or in your workplace. It directs everything. It's your master. You do what it says. And so the most we can do when it comes to sin is choose. It can choose when, where, how, but we cannot choose if, because sin is our master according to Jesus. And one of the ways that Jesus defines sin in John's Gospel, in John chapter 16, he says sin is simply this, it's not believing him. Sin is not believing Jesus. You read that in chapter 16, verse 9 of John's Gospel. But sin is not believing him. And instead, it's going to another master who will help direct what our lives are about and our beliefs about God and about the world and about us. And so we all go somewhere. And Jesus says if it's not to him, then whatever we go to, whether it's ourselves or other people or particular fads or particular worldviews that are not Jesus, then that will enslave you. So sin in this sense is looking to something else other than Jesus to give you answers and to give you life. I love the way that one bloke put it 500 years ago. He says we are curved in on ourselves. That's what sin is. And I always think of food a lot, a bit like the Black Forest Gatto. But think of quavers, cheesy quavers. They're pretty grim as well. But cheesy quavers are curved in, aren't they? And that's what we're like. We're people who are curved in on ourselves. That is, our lives are all about me and how I feel and what I think. And Jesus says we're enslaved to that. I wonder tonight whether you sense that in your life, whether you see it in your life. I know I see it in mine all the time. I see it in my family, I see it in the way I treat my wife, my kids, is that there's this sin that's curving me in on myself. And actually I need to look to Jesus to smash that so that I look to him and then love others as I should. So Jesus says we're enslaved to it. And sometimes we don't see it. One of the great images in the Bible of sin you find in the book that Pam was referring to earlier. She was talking about chapters 1 to 3. Well, in chapter 4, there's this bit where Adam and Eve, they have lots of kids, but their first two sons, called Cain and Abel. And the Lord comes and speaks to Cain, and he says, if you remember the story, Cain ends up killing Abel, but before that, the Lord comes to him and says, listen, Cain, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is to have you. And the picture is of this big cat, if you like, and the image is of this cat, big cat that's very crouched down, very low, looking very innocent, like it will do absolutely nothing. And then all of a sudden it pounces, and its arms are out there, and it's flapping, and the claws are sharp, and it rips you to shreds. We have a cat called Mittens, or we call her Mitts for short. She's savage, she's brutal. You look at her, you think she wouldn't do a thing. She is brutal. The amount of headless pigeons we've got around our house is terrible. She's always bringing them in. But she looks sweet and innocent. And so often the things we go to find freedom, they look sweet and innocent, but actually they are crouching at the door and they will have us. Jesus says we're slaves to sin, so we're not as free as we think. Last thing, he says, well, if freedom is very different, it's not following our hearts, it's following his heart. If we're not quite as free as we think, but actually we're slaves to sin, then where do we go? If we just leave it there and say, see you later, enjoy your lives. No, thankfully, Jesus does more. He gives us some beautiful answers and a solution to it all. He says, now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the son sets you free, you will be free indeed. There's quite loads of songs sung about that thing, about being free indeed. And Jesus comes in and he's saying that I am actually more freeing than you think. And I don't know what you've thought as you sat there tonight, and maybe you've heard other stories throughout this week. Maybe you've seen the lives of Christian friends and family, and you've seen the difference Jesus makes. Or I don't know what you're thinking about. Maybe you've heard Pam tonight and you're going, actually, you can see there's a joy and there's a peace that she saw in her sister that's now in her. And you're going, there's something good and beautiful and true about what I've been hearing tonight. But Jesus comes in and says, he is more freeing than you've ever thought. If you put your life into his hands, you'll see the liberation that he can truly bring to you. But as he says that, another image for us, and Pam's a primary school teacher, so think back to your primary school. Think back to a game maybe you used to play. I hope you still don't play it now, because that'd be a bit weird. But it was called Stuck in the Mud. We used to love it, and when I lived up around the kind of Midlands area, we used to play it all the time. And basically it's tag. You get tagged, and then you have to kind of stand there stuck like this, and you can't move. And the picture here is that all of us, every single one of us, we're stuck in the mud. We've all been tagged by sin. And it's our master. We can't move. We're stuffed. But Jesus is saying here, he's the only person, the only human being who's ever walked this planet and actually is free. And he's running around. And he can, if we are open to him, he can, metaphorically, run under our legs and set us free to run as well. That's what he wants to do for each one of us. He's the only one who's free. And he says that because he says, now a slave has no permanent place in the family. We're all stuffed. We're outside the family. But he says, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the son, i.e. himself, sets you free, you will be free indeed. Because Jesus is not just a human being. He's actually God the Son. And because he's that, he's not sinned. He's not a slave to it. In fact, he's actually truly free. And if you look at his life, you go, that there is a true human being. That's there someone who actually loves God, who loves people beautifully, brilliantly, every time. Doesn't despise others. He's always following what is right in this world. And Jesus says, look, I'm a son, and because I belong to the Father, I can truly set you free. And that's what we really long for. We long for a home again. We live in a world which feels rootless. We don't know who we are. We don't know where to go. And Jesus says, well, actually, I've come in as God the Son, the only Son, to make you sons too. And that means to bring you in as family as well. A place where you can put your feet up by the fire, where you know the God of the universe has seen everything you've ever done and yet loves you still. And he wants to liberate you by forgiving you and bringing you into relationship with God the Father, his Father, the one that Pam was so moved by. But as I finish, maybe we think, hang on again, but I still think if I was to become a follower of Jesus, if I was to put Jesus first in my life instead of me, if I was instead of be curvy and I'd look out to him, instead of following my heart, I follow his. If I do that, don't I have to, obey God? And maybe you're thinking of God in your mind of whatever it is, the picture you have. But some people think of God as like this kind of like miserable dictator who's just going to cripple and crush you. And if that's your view of God, I've just got to say, the only way you're going to know what God is really like is by listening to Jesus. He says no one's ever seen God except God the one and only Son. He has come to reveal him to us. That he is the radiance of God's glory. He's the image of the invisible God. That if you look at Jesus, you will see what God is really like. There's no ogre God behind the back of Jesus. Jesus is what God is like. And so if we think, but you have to obey God, that won't be hard. Yes, it'll be hard because it will contradict what you think half the time. But actually, that's the most liberating thing in the world, to go, actually, Jesus, you are for me. The things you say are good for me. And he is liberating in that. I know in my own life, when I go and do my own thing, when I don't listen to him, it causes a mess for other people. And it causes a mess for me as well, but more importantly, a mess for other people. But as I follow Jesus and go, Jesus, you say this, I don't feel like doing this, but actually it is the right thing to do, then actually he transforms you. And so if you are thinking, actually, if I become a Christian, that means I've got to put him first. Yes, you do. But actually, that is where real freedom resides. And you know it. You know that he's not some mad dictator kind of God who's going to come in and crush and cripple you because of what he was going to do a bit later in John's Gospel. The fact that he, the King of the universe, sees you to the core and then goes and dies for you. We're slaves to sin. But what does he do when he dies on the cross? He pays the price of our freedom. He sheds his blood. The price is his blood. He pours it out for you. He dies in your place, taking that punishment we deserve. And he does it for you because he loves you. And then you think, well, great news. That is brilliant. It is, and it's a real sign of love. But if he just stays dead, and he died on that cross for you, if he just stays dead, then how can he, the Son, introduce me to the Father? And this, by the way, is why he's the only way to the Father, because he's the only Son. And so he's the only one who can introduce you to the Father. But if he's dead, he can't do that. But 3 days later, Jesus didn't stay dead. But he breathed again. He stood up physically, literally, factually, actually. He stood up again. He walked around, showed himself to many people that he is alive. And because he's alive, he went back then to heaven to prepare a home for you. That's what we're told. And it's brilliant news that because Jesus is alive and he's with the Father in heaven, he is your gateway in to know the Father. Because he really is there for you right now. And you know you can trust him because he died and rose again for you. I'll finish with this slide before I'm going to offer prayer in a moment. But at the beginning of John's account, he writes this, and I think this is huge for us all. But to all who did receive Jesus, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. So my question to you tonight is, do you want to become one of those children of God? Do you want to enter into the family and have God as your father and Jesus as your brother? Do you want that living relationship with God? If you do, you've got to come tonight and do what Pamela's doing and say, you've got to say, God, I'm so sorry for living without you in that way. And to ask him, will you come and forgive me? And he says, yes, I will. And to ask him then to be your Lord from now on in. If you want to be in that family tonight, it's literally just you talking to God and pouring out your heart to him. I'm going to offer a way for you to do that now, which is me praying and saying some words, and if you agree with them, you can say amen at the end. And that's your way of turning from yourself and turning to God. If you want to join me in that, please pray with me now. Let's pray. Father, tonight I want to say sorry. I recognise that I am a slave to sin. I'm a slave to not believing Jesus. I'm a slave to following anything other than him. And I'm sorry for that tonight. I'm sorry for my sin. But I thank you so much that Jesus came into this world to die for sinners. He came to die for me and to rise for me, to pay for all those sins in my life. Thank you that Jesus' blood is big enough and powerful enough to forgive me. Right now, Father, would you please forgive me? And would you give me the gift of your Son, Jesus, and a relationship with you that lasts forever. In Jesus' name, amen. If you prayed that tonight, come and chat to me at the end. I've got a little booklet. Pam was talking about booklets earlier. There's a little booklet called Knowing God Personally, which I love to give to people who just prayed that, because it explains a bit more about what it now means to follow Jesus. So please come and ask me for those. And don't forget the free John's Gospels where you can read more about Jesus if you're investigating this. Grab one of those and see what you think. We're reading that. But handing over to Tom. Thanks so much.